Mark, welcome. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you too, Artem. Lovely to be here again.
Thank you for bringing your light to the conference. Guys, if you can see and hear Mark loud and clear, please put some fires and let's experience this last talk of the morning part. Oh, yeah, they can see you. So just let me know when you need the slides, and if something comes up, I'll be back on air. But otherwise, feel like home, and thank you for coming once again.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Artem. And hello, everybody. Greetings from the south coast of New South Wales. I am I'm about four or 5 hours south of Sydney. Live in a beautiful seaside village, and I'm looking forward to spending the next little while with you all. And my topic today is everyday storytelling. But first, I think I should clarify. So Sean and I are business partners. So, we've been running Anecdote since 2004. And earlier this afternoon, we were sitting down recording a podcast episode together. And so it's nice to be following on from Sean. And I'm going to also pick up one of the threads that Sean was talking about, which is the effect of being abstract and what that happens to our communication. So on Tuesday, I was running a virtual training program, our story-powered sales program, with a bunch of very senior sales executives. At one stage in the session, the most senior of those executives started to ask me a question. Now, it took about 3 minutes for the question to be asked. I was watching the other participants as this leader was asking the question, and their eyes were rolling into the back of their heads. It was very long, it was very complex, and I didn't understand what he said. I was trying very, very hard to understand him. And when he finished talking, I started to respond. And then I got a few words into my response, and I just thought, no way, I'm not doing this. So I stopped and I said, look, I'm not going to try and answer that question because I have absolutely no idea what you've asked me. That question went for 3 minutes, and I don't even know where to start. So here's what I'd like to do. In order for me to answer your question, I need to understand what it is. And the best way for me to understand is for you to give me an example. And I just looked at the rest of the faces on that Zoom window, and they were like looking at me in disbelief that I had actually said that I don't understand you, and I need an example in order to understand you. Now, the leader couldn't give me an example, so I made no attempt to answer his question. But it is an insight into an enormous problem that we have in our organizations and our institutions. And the problem is that people often misunderstand you and you them. Right? So people often misunderstand you and you misunderstand them. But people will rarely admit it. And when you think about all of the challenges and the miscommunication, the disinformation that we experience in our world, a lot of it is because of the way we communicate. So now there are many reasons why there is a big problem in our business communication, but the main one is that we use statements instead of stories. We use assertions instead of examples. And statements and assertions are almost 100% of cases abstract. Right, we'll talk a little bit about what the implications of being abstract are. Now, my invitation to everybody is that we be prepared to look objectively at the world of business communications. So in May last year, in fact, 12 months ago, I was in San Diego at the San Diego Conference Center, and Adam Grant was the Monday morning keynote speaker. And Adam Grant said one of the things that he said was, we must rethink our assumptions. If we do not put our assumptions on the table and closely examine them, and these are the words he used. He said, if you don't do that, you are stupid. And he said, you must think like a scientist. You must look at the evidence. And in business, when it comes to communication, we're not doing that. So some of you might remember, or you might be familiar with a movie called The Matrix. And it's a science fiction movie. And the main character, Neo, he leads a pretty normal life in his everyday life. He wakes up in his apartment. He goes to work in the city. He sees people, cars, the skyline. He has a difficult boss. But after hours, Neo his side hustle is he's a computer hacker, right? And sometimes he goes out to bars and nightclubs. Now, in the opening scenes in the movie, Neo, it's obvious that Neo has got an inkling that something's not right. Right? He doesn't know what it is, but he can't see it, he can't explain it, and it's a niggle that won't go away. It's a scratch that he can't itch. And Neo meets one of the other main characters, Morpheus, he's a leader of a rebellion against the machines that are controlling the world. And Morpheus says to Neo, you can have a choice. You can take the blue pill and keep seeing things the way they are, or you can take the red pill and you can see the world as it really is. And so Neo takes the red pill and he sees and the truth is revealed, right? He sees that his life is a fake. All humanity is imprisoned in capsules, and they're like human batteries to power the machines. The surface of the planet is unlivable. It's a post-apocalyptic ruin. He's living in a massive simulation. So he took the red pill and he saw the world as it was. And I want to start with a challenge. I want to be a bit provocative. If we look at the evidence, if we take the red pill, we'd see in our businesses and our institutions that communication is broken. And it's mainly this use of abstract communication that is the barrier. The beauty, though, the opportunity is that every one of us can make a difference by using everyday storytelling. So every time we want to make a point, we might, you're welcome to make a statement, but you also give an example. And Artem, if I could get you to put the slides up now, please. Now, everyday storytelling, Sean in the previous presentation hinted at this. The everyday storytelling is about using, we call them small s stories, everyday stories, little things that happen that you can use to make a point. Most people, they worry their story's not good enough. They think that story is this big thing, heroes' journeys and plot structures and all that. And yes, in Hollywood and in fiction, that is the way it is. But in business, it's these small stories that offer us enormous potential for spreading more light, taking away the darkness caused by the confusion that occurs when we speak in ways that people don't understand. All right, I'm going to show you the same animation that Sean showed. So Artem, could I get you to play that, the hider video, please? All right, so please watch this, and at the end, I'll ask you to put in the chat window what's happening.
Come on in. How are you? I'm great. Yeah, good. Nice to see you. Thank you. Your haircut since I saw you last.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah,
Different, probably.
Mum's just upstairs finishing a conference presentation.
All right. Now, you've seen that. That's the second time you've seen that in a few minutes. And I made some notes from the chat window from the first time when Sean showed it, and people, when they were explaining what was happening there, said things like a quarrel between lovers, a bully story, a story about introverts and extroverts. So I'd like you to find the chat window and just what was happening in your mind, what was happening there. And I would just point out that when Sean showed the clip, the first thing that came out was a bullying story, and that is across the world. That's the single most frequent description of what was happening in that video. But there are many other things when you ask people to explain what was going on. Many other things come up: domestic violence, love triangle, quarrel between lovers. Kids teasing their parents, kids teasing each other, parents chasing kids, the teenage love story. And what this demonstrates, in fact, rather than make an assertion, so that video was shown for the first time in 1944 by two scientists, two psychologists, Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel, and they had a very simple idea, and they had a very simple question. And the question was, what happens? What? I've just seen somebody's note with a CEO finding out about the sales figures in the chat window. Very good. Very good. All right. So Heider and Simmel asked a very simple question. And that was, what happens when a human's confronted with something that's ambiguous, something's abstract? And the first time that they showed it in 1944, there was 34 people in the room. And of the 34 people, 31 people described it as I've described: bullying, domestic violence, lovers quarrel, kids teasing parents, that sort of thing. 2 people described it as animals, either birds or fish. But of the 34 people, 33 told themselves a story. Right? It's how humans make sense of the world. When we don't understand something, we tell ourselves a story. It's called sense making. Now, the 34th person in that first experiment, when asked what was happening here, said they're geometric shapes moving around on a 2-dimensional plane, which is precisely what it is. And it's important that we understand that humans don't see the world literally. And when they're confronted with something that they don't understand, they make up something. Now, it's not necessarily a complete construction. It's based on their experience of the world. Based on my experience of the world, what's a plausible explanation of the thing I just saw? Okay. Anyway, that's what we do. So here's, so Artem, can I forward the slides, or do you need to forward the slides? All right, here we go. I can forward them. Look at this. Okay, good.
Yep. Do you need to fold them or to launch them back up?
No. Well, can people see the slide that says abstract? Is that displayed?
Yeah, guys, put some fire if you can see the slides, just in case.
All right. I got a bit of. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, I just showed you that short animation that reveals that when humans are confronted with something that's abstract, we make something up, right? We construct a story that's plausible. Once we've got that, we can move on. Now, here's the dictionary definition of abstract. It's disassociated from any specific instance. It's difficult to understand. And so if being abstract is a problem, then the solution is in that first line, number A, or letter A. All we need to do is to provide a specific instance. Every time we make an abstract statement, an assertion, an opinion, if we can then give an example, then we can significantly increase the extent to which people understand us. And this is the art of everyday storytelling. Now, so I'm just going to do a little role play here. What happens when you use abstract language? So I'm just going to demonstrate here. I'm going to pretend to be describing your company's strategy. All right. So folks, it's very important that we all focus on deep collaboration and connection across the entire business. Now, not just within our functional areas, but across geographies as well. So that's a very important part of our strategy. We need to optimize our operating practices to create efficiencies that allow us to make reinvestments that create long-term value. We need to, obviously, this is an obvious one, folks, we need to enhance productive integration across every area of the business. And finally, the most important thing we need to do is to create an enhanced culture of innovation that'll provide us with a sustainable competitive advantage. All right. So most of you probably went to sleep when I did that. So please find the chat window. I just want you to put one word in there. Was what I said abstract or concrete? All right, so it is completely abstract. Every person who hears me say that will have a different interpretation of what I've said. And yeah, so in the chat window, you're getting it, right? So being abstract is a big, big problem. And it causes an enormous amount of miscommunication, misunderstanding, disinformation, and we can do something about it because we can use examples. Right? Stories are concrete and understandable. And so what I'm going to try and what I am doing during this presentation, what I'm going to continue to try and do is that every time I make a statement or an assertion or give my opinion, I'm going to give you an example. And by the way, I want to go back to something that was in the chat window earlier. Somebody wrote, examples helps much in such a situation, but stories work much better. I said I was going to be a bit provocative. So Sean and I have been teaching people how to use story in a business situation for 20 years. And we run programs all over the world. And my girlfriend early this year, we went for a walk down the end of our street and we're standing overlooking the water. And she said, the thing in your workshop that was really most useful for me was when I finally understood that in business, stories are just events. They're just events. They're things that happen. They're examples that illustrate a point. So one of the things that is a barrier to everyday storytelling is this view that a story is something big and special. It's not. Stories in business are mostly just little things, events that happen, examples that you can give that illustrate a point. So, yeah, please don't be thinking that stories are these big and accessible things. It creates a sense, people they seem so mysterious that people are unwilling to use them, and we want to demystify the use of story. So, Artem, could you give me a time check, please, mate? All right, 20 minutes gone. Right. Right. I really apologize for this slide. This slide contains the text. So what happened was that somebody sent us an email saying, hey, look, I'm leaving my job. And here's an example of why. And so this text is the text of an email that his boss sent him. So please try your best to try and understand what is being said here. All right. Again, most of you probably either went to sleep or your brains exploded because they were working so hard trying to understand this. Now, a gentleman called William Zinser, who's a fabulous writer, in 1976, William Zinser wrote in his book, "We are a society strangling in unnecessary words, circular constructions, pompous frills, and meaningless jargon. Our national tendency is to inflate and thereby sound important." So Zinzer could well have been talking about this piece of text. And he is, of course, talking about the US, but it's anywhere in the world, right? Wherever you go, or wherever I've gone, and I'm talking everywhere. And I will firstly caveat this by saying I've never been to Russia, which I hope one day, Artem, you're going to rectify for me. But wherever we go in the world, it's the same thing. Right. So I asked ChatGPT to take this text and to simplify it. And here's what it came up with. So it is much simpler, but I would challenge you to actually relate this to anybody after the session. So I hope really to have only made the point here that being abstract is a huge barrier to communication in our businesses and our organizations and institutions. And we in the story community can be a beacon by setting example, by using stories to illustrate every point we want to make, every assertion, every statement. We can use an example. Now, many years ago, Sean and I came up with this little framework. It's the DNA of a story. So it's not a Hollywood style version. This is everyday storytelling. Everyday stories have a time stamp or a place marker, right? They all have that. Stories are events. They're things that happened, and they happen in a causal sequence. So if you don't have time or place and you don't have a sequence of events, you don't have a story. Right? Stories have characters, and the best stories are stories about humans, and stories also have some point. Sorry, they have some interesting thing that happens. There's some change in state. There's an insight. There's a lesson. There's a surprise. Does not have to be a big thing. Okay. So I can see that you can only see a slide title there. So thanks for letting me know that, because I'm wasting my time talking to the content of the slide. So I'm not sure what's happening now. I can see the content of the slide, but so what I'll do is I'll just describe it. The DNA of a story.
I can see the pictures, like the time,
the
okay. Place.
Great.
So it's okay. Guys, if you don't see some parts of the slide, just hit refresh because it's on the screen. I'm checking from two, like from a PC, from a phone. So
right. Yeah. All right.
It's all good, Mark.
Cool. So look, here's the thing. Stories are a very specific thing. They're not statements. They're not opinions. They're not assertions. They have time and place. They're a sequence of events. They have a character, and the best stories have human characters, and something interesting happens. And in business, they make a point. So this little framework, this model, it's purely to assist you, right? George Box in 1976 famously said, he's an English mathematician, he said, all models are wrong. Some are useful. And this is just intended to be a useful model that you can use. So now I'm going to make a couple of statements. So the first statement I'll make is that following on from what Sean said, Sean was talking about strategies and strategy stories and from fog to focus, right? And so my first statement is that most strategies are misunderstood and that most people don't understand the strategy. All right, so that's the statement. Now I'm going to follow that on by saying Kaplan and Norton in 1990 wrote a book called the book was called The Strategy Focused Organization. In it, it contained a concept called the balanced scorecard. And a balanced scorecard became a global standard for strategic planning throughout the 90s and into the noughties. Right, so these guys have 15 years of kind of world-leading experience in the world of strategy. In 2005, they published an article in Harvard Business Review. It's called the Office of Strategy Management. And the second sentence of the second paragraph it read, our research over the last 15 years shows that 95% of people in organizations don't understand the strategy and can't explain their role in that strategy. Right. So 95% of people don't understand the strategy. So that's a pretty appalling indictment of our ability to communicate strategically, and pretty much the same applies for every decision, idea, change that we communicate in business. Most people don't understand us. Again, mainly because we're abstract. So I want to demonstrate, go back and shine a light on what I just did. I made a statement and then I gave an example. In this case, the example was a piece of published research, right? But I told it as a story. Time and place, specific events, characters, and something interesting, and it made a point. So my first observation, I started this presentation talking about how business communication is broken. So we've just seen strategies. Well, we're hopeless at communicating them. But let's talk about internal communications in business. And across the world, communication is normally the number one thing that staff are complaining about in employee engagement surveys. So I've rarely seen it outside the top 4. It's normally number 1, but sometimes number 2. I've never seen it outside the top 4 things that staff are complaining about. Okay, so there's a statement. So now I'm going to give you an example. In 2017, I was in Istanbul, Turkey, and I was running at the University of Turkey, a magnificent building overlooking high up on a hill over the river, a beautiful room. And I had a room full of CEOs, heads of HR, chief operating officers, etc. And I had them for a full day. And at one stage, one of the participants, the CEO of a company, he said, so 2 years ago, our employee engagement surveys came in and communication was the number one thing that people were complaining about. Now, I care about this, and so I put a project in place to fix our communication. 12 months later, our employee engagement results came in again, and communication was still the number one thing that people were complaining about. But I knew these things take time. But last week, we got the second year's results, and communication is still the number one thing people are complaining about. We've done all these things. We've, different channels. We've increased the frequency of communication. We've increased the range of people who do the communication. We put in newsletters and blogs and intranet. So the channels have increased, but understanding hasn't changed. And so it's a clear illustration, not just that communication is broken, but the way we think about communication is also broken. Right? Just transmitting more abstract information to people doesn't help. This concept of everyday storytelling can make a difference. And so my exhortation, right? I exhort all of us to listen to Adam Grant and to rethink our assumptions about business communications, rethink our assumptions about what stories are, and realize that by using stories every day, we can reduce significantly the amount of misinformation, misunderstanding that costs businesses enormous amounts of time and money. And so my closing comments are that we can all make a difference. But first, we have to acknowledge that people often misunderstand us and we misunderstand them, and they will rarely tell us. Business communication is broken. If we take the red pill and look at it objectively and scientifically, and we look at the evidence, there is no doubt about it. And once we've done that, once we've taken the red pill and we realize that we have a problem, one of the key things we can do about it is we can use stories every day. So every time you make a statement or assertion, think, what example can I give so that people understand me? And there's one more very important thing that you can do. And it's the same thing that I did to that senior sales executive that was in the session on Tuesday. And what that thing is whenever anybody says something you don't understand, ask them for an example. And you'll find that most of the time they don't have one. They don't even know how they hold their opinion. Right? So it's one of the most important things that you can do to help remove or reduce the amount of misunderstanding and miscommunication and misinformation that we have on our planet at the moment. So thank you for your time. I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Mark. Lovely presentation, and I just left your links in the chat. That's wonderful, easy to grasp, and again, to the point. We have one question from Tatiana. Could you please one more time go through the icons on the DNA of a story, just one by one, so we can get them?
Cool. Can I just go back to that slide?
Of course. Let me bring it to it.
Oh, is it there?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's 4 things that a story must have. The first one is time or place. And really, if you look at most people who communicate really effectively, they just start by saying in 1944 or last Tuesday or this morning, right? Seriously, it is the best entry into a story. Is to start by saying when it happened. So the first thing a story must have is time or place. You don't have to have both, but you must have one or the other. The next thing is it's a sequence of events. Things that happen in a causal sequence, right? It's not an opinion. It's not an assertion. It's not a statement. It's not a concept. It's not a theory. Stories are events. So they're things that happen. Now, they can be very specific things or they can be broad things. You know, a broad thing. Well, actually, it's a specific. But I might say, back in the 1990s, when I graduated from the Royal Military College of Science in England, right? It's quite a broad event. It's not a specific thing that you can picture or feel, but it's an event. You can also have very specific events, like I described being in that room with the CEO of the company. Where employee engagement was a problem, right? The dialogue is a real giveaway that you're in an event, right? So that's the second thing is it's events. The third thing is characters, and if there is dialogue is a surefire indicator that you're in a story, because dialogue can only occur at a moment in time. So that's a good thing. And the final thing is something interesting happens. For example, in the story about the example I gave about the CEO who tried to fix internal communication, the interesting thing that happened was that they just got their second year's results and nothing's changed. And now I'm worried. So again, it doesn't have to be much. But those are the 4 things. Once you've got those, hey, you've got a story. It's a really handy little tool. I'm glad you asked me to explain it again. It's such a useful device.
Yeah, I remember reading it from Sean's book several years ago, and I was like, oh my God, this is way less complicated than a hero's journey or whatever the big storytelling offers us. This is for business. This is not for writing a script. This is on point. And Yule is thanking you because your presentation explained why asking 10 people about their personal experience turns out more useful than reading a book with common strategies for the problem.
Yes. Oh, that's a beautiful insight. Well done.
Love it. All right, Mark, that was fabulous. Guys, if you have any questions for Mark or if you want to reach out, please use the contacts I just sent to the chat. We still have a minute for the final question, Mark. I want your opinion on this, but not on a type of stories like small or big, but more or on the theme. So you would add to Sean's part. So a lighthouse can show us where the danger is, and a chain of lighthouses can lead us from the dangerous waters. What would you like more people to tell stories about so the world has more lighthouses for the now?
Okay, well, not surprisingly, Artem, I've got a story that I'd like to share. All right.
Lovely.
Some of you will be familiar with Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the early American presidents. And before he was president, he was in the Philadelphia legislature. And I want you to think this is the 1730s. This is a long time ago. And Franklin held one of the committee positions in the Philadelphia legislature, and he was due for re-election. And one of his political opponents gave a long and impassioned speech against Franklin, and it hurt Franklin deeply. His political rival, who'd given the speech, was, by all accounts, a very, very approachable and likable fellow. By all accounts, he was a very, very intelligent fellow, extremely well educated. And Franklin did not, he's going, I don't want to make an enemy of this guy, so I'm not going to enter into an argument with him. Nor do I want to kowtow to him and appear to be subservient, in trying to curry his favor. He said, I want to be this person's friend. And he thought to himself, what do friends do? And he thought, well, friends borrow books from each other. And he knew this fellow had a beautiful library and had a rare and curious book. So Franklin went home that day and wrote a letter, right? Because this is the days where you didn't send emails or texts, right? He wrote a letter, hand-wrote the letter, was delivered to his political rival, asking to borrow that rare and curious book. It was duly sent back. His political rival sent it to Benjamin Franklin that same day. He read it within a week and sent it back to his political rival with a lovely thank you letter. He then borrowed another book. The next time he went into the Philadelphia legislature, this fellow, his political rival, came over and greeted him warmly. It had never happened before. He continued to borrow books. They started borrowing books from each other. They became lifelong friends. Benjamin Franklin was sitting by his political rival's bed holding his hand when he died. Right. So Benjamin Franklin asked himself a question. What do friends do? And I would ask us all to ask the question, what do storytellers do? Right? We tell stories. And I want you to move away from this big Hollywood constructed thing. We tell stories every day, and we ask people for examples every day. And if we all do this, we can amplify the light from our lighthouse enormously and reduce the amount of misinformation. Anyway, there you go.
All right. So just to be clear, the gist of it is sharing them every day and just being not specific about the topic. But given the theme you've highlighted in the story, I would say that it's meaningful to also share stories where people are inquiring into what friends do or what storytellers do or what do I do. Is that so?
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get across there is that if we all ask ourselves a question, what do storytellers do? And then we think, if I want to make a point, what story can I use to make that point? And we do that more and more and more, then we're going to get the flywheel moving, right? The more of us that do this, the more of us that use examples every day, the more of us that ask for examples every day, the faster the flywheel will move.
Yeah, totally agree with you on this. Thank you so much. And Tatiana is writing that the story is great and the structure is more clear now. So let's just give Mark our fire for the ending and thank him for coming to this conference. I thank you personally, and the fire is already raging. So thank you so much for coming once again, Mark.
It's a pleasure. And Artem, thank you for the opportunity, and kudos, respect for the work that you do putting this together.
Thank you so much. It's also great to do this when such people as yourself come. So thank you so much, and we'll be closing this now. Thank you once again.
Okay. Bye, everybody.